I was thinking back to practitioner studies, which is probably about 8 years ago for me at this point. And when I first started learning, I mean, I'd already learned stuff in the foundational classes that I had taken the 2 years before, but things were getting a lot more serious, a lot more intense through practitioner studies. And the thing that we kept hearing again and again and again are the three principles of religious science, which is what I came up in, which is a branch of the global New Thought movement. And so when I came here, I'm like, I just want to talk about New Thought. I just want to talk about these principles in general and not necessarily go with just science of mind or unity or divine science or universal foundations for better living. So the three things are oneness. There's only one thing going on. Call it whatever it is that works for you. Because there's only one thing going on, everyone and everything is that. So the second thing is essentially the divinity or sacredness of everything. And during practitioner studies, the third thing that was drilled into our brains, it was an exam question, whether oral or written exams, was we are spiritual beings living in a spiritual universe governed by our use of spiritual laws, the main law being the law of cause and effect. And so that is something that it was hammered home again and again and again. It's something that we memorized and could, spew forth and all that kind of stuff. But then over the years, especially once I went through advanced consciousness studies and then through ministerial studies, I was thinking, what does that mean to people that aren't, in class, that aren't taking lessons, that, aren't into all the jargon and the language kind of thing? And for me, what it came down to was personal responsibility. That no one else creates our reality, that no one else lives our life, that no one else creates our life experience. And that life experience is created, it is received, it is offered, all of the stuff according to our worldview, according to our perspective, according to all of the stuff that brought us to this moment in time where we are, time being a construct, but everything that has come before, right here, right now, all of that becomes this lens for how we receive and perceive the world and how we create our life experience. Most of the time, and I've talked about this before, 95% of the time, we're not aware of what we're doing, of what we're thinking, of the choices we're making. We're just going along by rote based on all the stuff that has happened, all the stuff we've experienced before. But about 5% of the time, and maybe a little bit more when people are very intentional about their personal growth, their transformation, their journey, that is when we are using our conscious mind and applying, or actually not applying, but directing the energy, the love, the creativity that we are purposefully and intentionally, right? Yet, sometimes what we think doesn't always translate into our experience. There's an incongruency there. And so we have to go, okay, so what is it that's going on in the subjective mind and the subconscious that is filtering through, or that the conscious thoughts are filtering through, that is becoming our life experience? And that's when we need to look to beliefs and memories and ideas and even things like opinions and stuff like that other people have of us that influence us, all hanging out in the subjective. And so personal responsibility was the thing. It's up to us. No one can create our life for us. And then last week, I facilitated the first VTC orientation workshop. And I was so glad to finally have it happen, because it was scheduled way back in February, but it was scheduled the day after I fell off this stage and twisted many, many parts of my body. And so I could have done it, but I chose not to because I was incredibly physically uncomfortable and in a lot of pain, and I just wanted to be able to be present and focus on what I wanted to share. And then the second time, I inadvertently scheduled it for Father's Day and thought, maybe that's not the best day to host a workshop. So we had it last week after our big ice cream station, National Ice Cream Day, Friendship Sunday. And I think there were 11 or 12 people, and we motored through a lot of key points, the principles, the practices, our VTC values compass. And the way that I wanted to talk about this third principle now, instead of personal responsibility, instead of spiritual laws that maybe people are like, what is that? That's so woo-woo. I want to look at it and talk about it now as conscious participation. okay? Because life is not something that, I mean, it may feel like it. If you look at it from a scientific or materialistic perspective, I walk out of this room, you guys are all still sitting here, life is plodding along without me. But from a quantum perspective, from a spiritual perspective, everything that we experience is filtered through our minds. And so when we're not there, it's not happening. When we're not focusing on it, it's not happening. When we're not paying attention to it, it's not happening. And so in order to experience our life, we need to participate in it. That means we need to be intentional and purposeful with the way that we are living our life. Because if we keep going through life that sort of 95% of the way, sometimes we might, have a good time, things might work out, and things might unfold the way that we would prefer. But a lot of times, it's just kind of going to be by accident or just by default. It's not going to be because we consciously chose certain things, we consciously made decisions, we took certain action steps. It's going to be by happenstance. And so what I want to make sure that all of us are committed to more fully is to actually participating in our life. And this kind of goes back to the very first thing that I was talking about, where the latter half of that statement, we are spiritual beings living in a spiritual universe governed by our use of those spiritual laws. So if we're aware that these laws exist, but we're not using them consciously, well, it's kind of like chance, right? But if we are aware that these laws exist, and they exist whether we're aware of them or not, okay? So let's just, right now, I'm just asking you to, what's the phrase that I'm looking for? My words are floating around. Suspend your belief, suspend your disbelief, and just let's all go from the reference point that these spiritual laws exist, okay? There are these universal laws that are always in play. Some of them we're aware of. I bet there are a ton that we're not aware of. But for the ones that we are aware of, then how about we focus our attention on using those laws? Like something like what we focus on expands, right? So where we put our attention, that thing grows. Whatever we appreciate, appreciates. So our job is to focus on the good. Regardless of what the experience is, regardless of what the condition, the circumstances, the opinions, the diagnosis, the prognosis, all of that requires tending to, for sure. But what is ours to do is to remember that behind all of that, underneath all of that, at the very core of all of that, if love is all there is, love is all there is. So it is ours to focus on that. And then as we focus on the love we truly are, the love that everyone and everything else is, then we start to navigate all of those other challenging things with more ease, with more grace. And when I say with more ease, I don't necessarily mean that everything is sunshine and roses and rainbows. I mean that we are aware, okay? And that means we become more intentional with our choices. We are participating more intentionally in life. And that's when we start to come into alignment. And do people remember that align is our theme for the year here at VTC? So this is when our thoughts, choices, and actions come into alignment. This is when our mind, our body, and our heart come into alignment. This is when we become more congruent or coherent or become more aligned physically, mentally, and emotionally. On Thursdays, for the last few months, we have been anchored in The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. A book is one of the new elements of our Thursday night spiritual salon. And this book, who's read this book, even if you haven't come on Thursdays? The Alchemist? Okay, so a few people have read this book. So this is a beautiful, beautiful hero's journey story. At the beginning, the hero, Santiago the boy, he experiences a call through a dream. He questions it, thinks it's weird, enlists some help, but then it's like, I'm kind of going to dismiss it. But the call continues to call him, right? And so then he starts to follow it. He kind of has his doubts, but he starts getting some help and support along the way. And so he's like, okay, I think I can actually do this. And so he starts, moving along towards this dream, this personal legend of his. But then he gets to a point where, oh, you know what? Life is actually pretty good. I've amassed all this wealth. I have all this experience. I have all these things. I can just go back to my life the way it was. I know exactly how it's going to unfold. That's good enough for me. But you know what? That call is forever there. That call continues to pull him, just like that call continues to pull us, especially when we're not paying attention to it. Because this is the love that we truly are that is just ready and waiting to be unleashed in creative and unique and specific ways to you that it can't be unleashed by anybody else. And so when we're not paying attention, it's going to keep going, hello, hello, are you listening? Sometimes really loudly, sometimes in ways that make us stop. We get sick, we get some kind of illness, we crash our car into a stone wall and we have to slow down and we have to pay attention more, right? So many different ways so that we actually tune in and show up and participate in our life the way that we can rather than the way that we're familiar with and we have up until now. So eventually, in The Alchemist, the boy surrenders to the process. And as he surrenders to this process, every single step along the way, he is tested. And those tests, they get bigger, they get meaner, they get badder, they get more complicated and more challenging the further he goes. But what's so cool is that as he's going along his journey, he is getting more and more prepared. He is getting better and better equipped. He is being empowered by every single experience that he has overcome, which starts to convince him that based on his commitment and his intentionality, that he has it in him to overcome any kind of challenge that might come his way. And then eventually in the book, like with life, he reaches his destination, he gets to the goal, and then what does he discover? That the thing that he was looking for was right there with him all along. And so that's what is ours to do, right? And we will be tested many times along the way, but ours is to remember who and what we are, to show up and embody the love we truly are, and to participate in our life rather than kind of being guided along by a current. So the title of my talk today is, Life is Calling, Participate. So the reason I chose this picture is because I was trying to find something, surfing or whitewater rafting or whatever, where there is some kind of current or wave or something that could just, guide you along and crash you into an embankment. But you have to make choices along the way, right? So that you can actually direct the energy that you are and have your experience. Well, I don't know what's going on here, but this dog is so convicted, right? And I think that this dog, what it's doing, what I imagine is it's got a balance on this paddleboard or surfboard, no matter how calm and still these waters are, because that foundation is, even though the thing he's standing on is solid, but the thing underneath, it's wavy, it's fluid, right? And so he's got to make these constant adjustments every time, every moment, every breath, right? Some of them he's conscious of, some of them he's not, but he's deciding again and again and again, and he's participating in his experience. And so to me, this is a reminder for us to be more intentional, to live life more purposefully, to commit and recommit again and again and again. Because like our meditation quote this morning, life is potentiality and being. Participation is what creates our life experience. So the more intentional our participation, our thought, our choices, our actions, the more committed we become. And the more committed we become, the more likely we are to discover and realize the purpose for our being. So in the end, transformation is a lifelong journey. And as we participate more intentionally and consistently in our own spiritual evolution, we keep affirming and reaffirming the knowing that love is our true nature. And every committed choice and every action step we take allows us to embody that truth more fully in every aspect of life, for ourselves, for each other, and our world. So participate, participate, participate. Thank you, and so it is.